Dr. Maya sat in her small office, surrounded by thick books and research papers scattered everywhere. The walls were covered with charts showing how people make friends, fall in love, and build families. But here's the thing, Maya knew everything about human relationships from studying them, yet she had almost no real relationships of her own. Maya worked at the university as a researcher. Her job was to watch people and understand why they do what they do. She was really good at it too. Other professors would come to her with questions about human behavior, and she always had the right answers. But when those same professors invited her for coffee or to join them for lunch, Maya would politely say no and go back to her books. Her childhood wasn't like most kids. While other children were playing with friends, Maya was reading advanced books because both her parents were professors. They taught her that knowledge was the most important thing in life. So Maya learned to watch people instead of playing with them. She became an expert at understanding others from a distance. Every morning, Maya would arrive at her office early, before anyone else. She liked the quiet. She would make herself a cup of tea and sit down to review her latest research. Maya was studying something fascinating: how strangers become friends and how trust builds between people. Her work was becoming famous around the world. Universities from different countries wanted to hear about her discoveries. But there was something strange about Maya's situation. She could tell you exactly how two people fall in love, the scientific steps, the brain chemicals involved, even how long it typically takes. She knew that shared experiences bring people closer together. She understood that being vulnerable with someone creates deeper bonds. She had graphs and data proving all of this, yet Maya had never experienced any of it herself. Maya's apartment was just like her office, full of research materials, but empty of personal touches. There were no photos of friends, no gifts from loved ones, no signs that anyone else had ever spent time there. Her refrigerator was covered with scientific articles instead of family pictures. Her living room had a desk where she worked late into the night, analyzing other people's relationships while sitting completely alone. The university cafeteria was where Maya did some of her best observation work. She would sit in the corner with her notebook, watching groups of students laugh together, couples holding hands, and professors having animated discussions. She documented everything: how people's faces changed when they felt included, how they leaned in when someone was telling an interesting story, how they touched each other's arms when showing support. Maya noticed patterns everywhere. She saw how people who shared personal stories became closer friends. She observed how couples who tried new activities together seemed happier. She watched how people who helped each other during difficult times formed the strongest bonds. All of this went into her research, making her papers more detailed and accurate than anyone else's work. But Maya never joined these interactions. When students approached her table to ask about her classes, she would answer their questions politely, but never invite them to sit down. When professors tried to include her in their conversations, she would listen and contribute knowledge, but never share anything personal about herself. Maya's daily routine was predictable and safe. She would wake up, read research papers over, breakfast, go to work, spend hours analyzing human behavior, return home, and read more papers before bed. Weekends were the same, except she had more time to work on her studies. She ordered groceries online to avoid unnecessary social interactions. She even attended university meetings online when possible. The irony of Maya's life was becoming clearer each day, though she didn't realize it yet. Her latest research project was about loneliness and its effects on people's health. She had interviewed dozens of lonely people, documenting how isolation affected their sleep, their eating habits, and their overall happiness. She wrote detailed reports about how human connection was essential for mental and physical well-being. Maya's work was so good that other researchers started using her methods. Her papers were quoted in textbooks. Graduate students wanted to work with her. But when they met her in person, they found her difficult to connect with. She was brilliant and helpful with their research, but she remained distant and formal. Many students left her program feeling like they knew her work, but not her as a person. The university library was Maya's favorite place. She had a special table in the quiet section where she would spend hours every day, The librarians knew her well, but their interactions were always brief and professional. Maya preferred it this way. She felt comfortable surrounded by knowledge, but uncomfortable when conversations became personal. Maya's expertise in human behavior made her valuable to her colleagues, but it also created a barrier. People felt like she was always analyzing them, which made them nervous. They weren't wrong. Maya couldn't help but observe and categorize human behavior wherever she went. It was her job, but it had also become her way of avoiding real participation in social situations. As Maya continued her research, she was building a comprehensive understanding of how humans connect, love, and support each other. Her work was helping thousands of people improve their relationships. Therapists used her research to help couples. Social workers applied her findings to help children make friends. Her knowledge was making the world a better place. But Maya herself remained on the outside, watching life happen to other people, while her own life stayed small and predictable. She had become the world's expert on something she had never truly experienced: genuine human connection. Maya knew her research was missing something important. She had all the theory, all the data, but she needed to see real people interacting up close. That's when she heard about the community center downtown. They had support groups where people came together to help each other through difficult times. It was perfect for her research. The community center was different from the university. It was older, with painted walls that showed years of use, and comfortable chairs arranged in circles. Instead of formal lecture halls, when Maya walked in for the first time, she felt nervous in a way she didn't expect. This wasn't her usual controlled environment where she could observe from behind glass windows or sit in the back of a room. The group leader, David, was a warm man in his 50s who had been running these sessions for over 10 years. He welcomed Maya with a genuine smile and firm handshake. When she explained that she was there to study group dynamics for her research, he nodded thoughtfully. "That's fine," David said, "but I hope you'll find this is more than just data. These people are sharing real parts of their lives here." Maya assured him she would be respectful. She had her notebook ready and found a chair slightly outside the main circle. She planned to observe quietly and document everything she saw. This was just another research project, she told herself. The first person to arrive was Linda, a woman in her 60s who had recently lost her husband of 40 years. Maya watched. As Linda sat down slowly, her eyes still red from crying. Next came Tom, a middle-aged man who had lost his job and was struggling to find his place in the world. Then Rita arrived, a young mother dealing with depression after having her first baby. As more people filled the circle, Maya started taking notes. She documented how they greeted each other, how they chose their seats, how their body language changed when certain topics came up. She was fascinated by the small rituals they had developed, how they always asked about each other's week, how they remembered details from previous sessions, how they created a safe space just by being present. David began each session the same way. He would ask everyone to take a deep breath together, then invite anyone who wanted to share how they were feeling. Maya watched as people who had been strangers just months ago now supported each other like family members. She saw how vulnerability created connection just like her research predicted. Linda was particularly interesting to observe. In her first few sessions, she had barely spoken. She would sit with her arms crossed, looking down at her hands. Gradually, as others shared their stories, Linda began to open up. She talked about missing her husband's terrible jokes, about learning to cook for one person, about feeling invisible in a world built for couples. Maya documented how the group responded to Linda's sharing. They didn't try to fix her problems or tell her to move on. Instead, they listened. They nodded, shared their own experiences with loss. Maya wrote detailed notes about how this validation seemed to help Linda more than any advice could have. Tom's story was different, but equally compelling for Maya's research. He had defined himself by his career for so long that losing his job felt like losing his identity. The group helped him see that he was more than his work title. They encouraged him to pursue interests he had given up years ago. Maya watched him slowly transform from someone who barely made eye contact to someone who offered advice and support to newer group members. Rita's situation gave Maya insights into how people heal from invisible struggles. Depression was hard for others to understand because it didn't show on the outside. But in this group, Rita found people who didn't need her to explain why getting out of bed was sometimes an achievement. They celebrated small victories with her and sat with her during difficult days without judgment. Week after week, Maya filled notebook after notebook with observations. She documented how trust built gradually through consistent showing up. She noted how people became more willing to share as they saw others being accepted despite their flaws and struggles. She tracked how the group developed inside jokes and shared references that created a sense of belonging. Maya was particularly fascinated by what she called emotional contagion, how feelings spread through the group. When one person was having a good week, others seemed to brighten too. When someone was struggling, the whole group became more gentle and supportive. It was like watching a living organism respond to the needs of its parts. But something unexpected started happening to Maya during these observations. She began to feel something she hadn't experienced in years. She wanted to be part of what she was watching. The warmth and acceptance in the room was unlike anything in her academic world. These people weren't performing or trying to impress anyone. They were just being human together. Maya found herself looking forward to the weekly sessions, not just for her research, but for reasons she couldn't quite name. She started arriving early to help David set up chairs. She began to recognize the subtle signs that someone was having a difficult day. She felt genuinely concerned when group members missed sessions. The group members started noticing Maya too. At first, they were curious about the quiet woman in the corner taking notes. Some felt uncomfortable being studied. Asked. And Maya showed up consistently. They began including her in their pre-session small talk. They would ask how her week was going, though Maya always kept her answers brief and professional. David sometimes caught Maya's eye during particularly emotional moments, as if inviting her to participate rather than just observe. But Maya would simply nod and return to her notebook. She was there as a researcher, she reminded herself. Getting involved would compromise her objectivity. Yet Maya couldn't ignore how different this environment felt from her university world. Here, people valued emotional honesty over intellectual achievement. They cared more about showing up for each other than being right. They found strength in admitting weakness and connection through shared struggles. Maya's research was becoming richer than anything she had done before, but she was also becoming aware of something uncomfortable. She was documenting the very thing she had never experienced: genuine community and mutual support. It was a Tuesday evening when everything changed for Maya. She was sitting in her apartment, going through hours of video recordings from the support group sessions. Her laptop screen glowed in the dark room as she paused, rewound, and analyzed every interaction. This was her favorite part of research, finding patterns in human behavior that others might miss. Maya had been doing this for 3 months now, and she had enough material for several research papers. She was excited about her findings. The data clearly showed how people healed through connection, how trust built over time, and how vulnerability created stronger bonds than keeping walls up. It was groundbreaking research that would help therapists and counselors around the world. But as Maya watched the footage that night, something caught her attention that made her stomach drop. In every single frame where the group members were laughing, hugging, or showing genuine joy, there was Maya in the background, separate, distant, writing in her notebook. She looked like a scientist studying lab animals rather than a person witnessing beautiful human moments. Maya paused the video and stared at herself on the screen. While Linda was sharing a breakthrough about learning to live alone, Maya was taking notes. While Tom was celebrating getting a job interview, Maya was documenting his body language. While Rita was crying tears of relief about feeling better, Maya was analyzing the group's response patterns. She had become invisible to herself. But now, she could see what everyone else saw: a woman who studied life instead of living it. Maya closed her laptop and walked to her bathroom mirror. She looked at her reflection and asked herself a question she had never considered before. When was the last time I felt the kind of joy I see in those people? She couldn't remember. Maya walked back to her living room and really looked at it for the first time in years. Her walls were covered with certificates and awards, but there wasn't a single photo of her with another person. Her bookshelf was full of research about relationships, but she had no one to call when she felt sad or excited. Her refrigerator was covered with academic articles about the importance of social connection, but she ate every meal alone. The irony hit her like a punch to the chest. She had spent years becoming an expert on the very thing she was most afraid to experience, real human connection. Maya sat on her couch and thought about her day. She had woken up alone, eaten breakfast, while reading research papers, gone to work where she talked to colleagues only about professional matters, observed the support group without participating, and come home to analyze what she had seen. Tomorrow would be exactly the same, and so would every day after that. For the first time, Maya understood what loneliness actually felt like. It wasn't just being alone. She had always been alone. Loneliness was realizing that she was missing something essential about being human. Something that all her books and research couldn't teach her. Maya picked up her notebook and flipped through pages of observations about the support group. She read her notes about how Linda had started smiling again after sharing her grief. She reviewed her documentation of how Tom's confidence grew when the group celebrated his small victories. She studied her analysis of how Rita found strength through accepting help from others. All of this healing and growth was happening right in front of Maya, but she was experiencing none of it herself. She was like a food critic who had never tasted the meals she was reviewing. Maya realized that her childhood had trained her to be an observer. Her professor parents had taught her that knowledge was safety, that understanding something was better than experiencing it. They had raised her to analyze rather than participate, to study rather than feel. This approach had made her an excellent researcher, but it had also made her a stranger to her own life. She thought about David, the group leader, and how he had looked at her during particularly emotional moments. She now understood that he wasn't just acknowledging her presence. He had been inviting her to join the human experience happening in that room. But Maya had been too scared and too stuck in her role as observer to accept the invitation. Maya pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. She had numbers for colleagues, delivery services, and work-related people, but no one she could call just to talk. She had no one to share this realization with, no one who would care about her personal breakthrough. The silence in her apartment felt different now. Before, it had felt peaceful and controlled. Now it felt empty and sad. Maya could hear her neighbors through the thin walls, a couple laughing at a movie, a family having dinner together, friends, talking on the balcony next door. Life was happening all around her, but she wasn't part of any of it. Maya went back to her laptop and looked at the video again. This time, instead of analyzing the group members, she watched herself. She saw how she held her body, arms crossed, shoulders tense, always ready to write something down. She noticed how she never made eye contact with anyone for more than a few seconds. She observed how she positioned her chair just outside the circle. It was close enough to hear everything but far enough away to avoid being included. Maya had become an expert at protecting herself from the very experiences that her research proved were essential for human happiness and health. She knew that meaningful relationships required vulnerability, but she had built her entire life around avoiding vulnerability. She understood that connection came from sharing personal experiences, but she had never shared anything real about herself with anyone. The most painful realization was that Maya had been studying happiness and healing while actively avoiding both. She had spent years helping other people understand how to build better relationships while keeping herself completely isolated from the benefits of those connections. Maya looked at her research notes one more time. Everything she had written about the power of human connection was true. The problem was that she had been writing about it instead of living it. She had been documenting other people's healing while missing her own chance to heal. For the first time in her adult life, Maya understood that all her knowledge meant nothing if she didn't have the courage to use it in her own life. The following week, Maya sat in her car outside the community center for 20 minutes before going inside. Her hands were shaking and her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. For the first time in months, she had left her notebook at home. The empty passenger seat, where it usually sat, felt like a missing piece of herself. Maya had barely slept the night before. She kept imagining what would happen if she actually tried to participate in the group instead of just watching. What if they rejected her? What if they thought she was strange for observing them all this time? What if she said something wrong and ruined the safe space they had created? But Maya also knew she couldn't continue living the way she had been. The realization from the previous week had changed something fundamental inside her. She couldn't unsee what she had discovered about herself, and she couldn't go back to pretending that studying life was the same as living it. When Maya finally walked into the community center, her legs felt unsteady. David noticed immediately that she didn't have her usual notebook and pen. He gave her a knowing smile, the kind that said he had been waiting for this moment. "Good evening, Maya," David said warmly. "How are you feeling today?" Usually Maya would give a brief, polite answer and quickly sit down. But today, she paused and actually thought about the question. "I'm nervous," she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. David nodded understandingly. "That's completely normal. Being present with our feelings instead of analyzing them can feel scary at first." As the group members arrived, Maya noticed they seemed surprised to see her without her notebook. Linda gave her a gentle smile and asked if she was okay. Tom waved hello and made a comment about how different she looked. Rita complimented Maya on her sweater, a small kindness that made Maya's chest feel warm in an unfamiliar way. When everyone was seated, David began the session as usual. "Let's take a deep breath together and center ourselves," he said. Maya had observed this ritual dozens of times, but participating in it felt completely different. She closed her eyes and breathed with the group, feeling connected to them in a way she had never experienced before. "Tonight, I'd like to focus on courage," David announced. "Now, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is show up as ourselves, without our usual defenses or masks. Would anyone like to share about a time when you had to be brave?" Maya's heart started racing again. She had never shared anything personal with this group. She had always been the silent observer, the one who listened but never spoke. But something inside her knew that this was her moment. Several group members shared their stories. Linda talked about the courage it took to go to her first social event after her husband died. Tom shared about applying for jobs that felt too good for him. Rita described the bravery required to ask for help when her depression was at its worst. Then there was a pause. David looked around the circle and his eyes met Maya's. "Maya," he said gently, "you've been with us for several months now. Would you like to share anything tonight?" Maya felt every eye in the room turn to her. Mouth went dry and her hands started trembling. Every instinct told her to decline politely and return to her observer role. But then she remembered the video footage, the image of herself always on the outside, always watching life instead of living it. Double quotes Maya started, then stopped. She looked down at her hands, then back up at the circle of faces watching her. "With patience and kindness, I've been studying all of you." The room was quiet, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of quiet that happens when people are truly listening. "I'm a researcher," Maya continued, her voice getting stronger. "I study human relationships and how people connect with each other. I've been coming here to observe how you support each other, how you build trust, how you heal together. I've written hundreds of pages about what I've seen here." Maya paused and took a shaky breath. "But last week I realized something that scared me. I know everything about how humans connect, but I've never actually done it myself. I've spent my whole life watching other people live while I stayed safely on the sidelines." Linda leaned forward slightly, her eyes full of understanding. Tom nodded as if he recognized something familiar in Maya's words. Rita's expression was gentle and encouraging. "I grew up thinking that understanding something was enough," Maya went on. "My parents taught me that knowledge could protect me from getting hurt, so I learned to study people instead of befriending them. Expert on love without ever falling in love, I researched friendship without ever being a real friend to anyone." Maya's voice cracked slightly. "I've been so afraid of being rejected or hurt that I've rejected myself from life. I've been living like a ghost, watching everyone else experience the very things I desperately want but am too scared to try." The room remained quiet, but Maya could feel the warmth and acceptance radiating from the group.
Hi.
David's eyes were kind and patient. Linda had tears in her eyes, but they were tears of recognition and compassion. "I don't know how to do this," Maya admitted. "I don't know how to be vulnerable or how to let people see who I really am. I've been hiding behind my research and my professional identity for so long that I'm not sure who I am without them." Maya looked directly at David. "You've been so patient with me, letting me observe your group even though I wasn't really participating. I've learned so much about how humans connect by watching all of you. But now I want to stop watching and start living." Her voice was barely above a whisper when she added, "I want to learn how to be human with other humans. I want to experience what I've only studied. Would you? Would you help me learn how to do this? Not as a researcher, but as someone who wants to actually be part of something real." David's smile was warm and genuine. "Maya, you just took the first step. What you shared tonight, that vulnerability, that honesty about your fears and desires, that's exactly how humans connect. You're already doing it." Linda reached over and gently squeezed Maya's hand. "Welcome to being human, dear. It's scary sometimes, but it's also the most beautiful thing in the world." Maya felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of sadness or loneliness, or tears of relief, of finally coming home to herself, of discovering that the thing she had been studying was actually inside her all along. 6 months later, Maya's life looked completely different. But the changes had happened so gradually that she almost didn't notice them at first. It started with small things, like actually answering when people asked how she was doing, instead of giving polite but empty responses, or staying after the support group sessions to help David stack chairs and clean up, something she had never done during her months as an observer. The biggest change was in Maya's apartment. The walls that had once been covered only with academic certificates and research charts now displayed colorful artwork from the community center's art therapy sessions. There was a painting Linda had made during a particularly difficult week, which she had given to Maya as a thank you gift. Next, to it hung a small sculpture that Tom had created when he was celebrating his new job. Maya's refrigerator, which had been covered with research articles about human connection, now held photos of real moments with real people. There was a picture from David's birthday celebration at the community center where Maya was laughing so hard at one of his stories that her eyes were closed. Another photo showed Maya and Rita having coffee together, something that had become a weekly tradition. The most surprising change was Maya's relationship with her work. Instead of studying human connection from a distance, she was now writing about it from personal experience. Her latest research paper was unlike anything she had written before. Combined scientific data with her own journey from isolation to connection, creating something that other researchers called revolutionary. Maya's colleagues at the university had noticed the change too. Dr. Peterson, who had worked in the office next to Maya's for 5 years, mentioned that Maya seemed different, more relaxed, or willing to have conversations that weren't just about work. Maya had even started joining some of her colleagues for lunch occasionally, something she had never done before. But the most significant change was Maya's friendship with David. What had started as a professional relationship between a researcher and a group leader had grown into something Maya had only read about in her studies, a genuine friendship. Based on mutual respect and care, David had become the first person Maya felt comfortable calling when she was having a difficult day. When Maya's research grant was approved for her new project about healing through community, David was the first person she wanted to share the good news with. When Maya felt overwhelmed by all the changes in her life, David was there to remind her that growth often feels uncomfortable at first. Their friendship had taught Maya something important that all her research had missed, that real relationships aren't built through perfect interactions, but through showing up consistently, even when it's messy or awkward. Maya had learned to be patient with herself as she navigated this new way of living. Maya's relationship with the support group had evolved too. She was no longer the quiet observer in the corner. She had become an active participant who both gave and received support. When new members joined the group, Maya found herself in the unusual position of being someone who helped others feel welcome, something she had never imagined she would be able to do. Linda had become like a mother figure to Maya, someone who checked in on her and invited her to family gatherings. Maya had never experienced this kind of intergenerational friendship before. Linda taught Maya practical things, like how to cook for one person without it feeling lonely, and how to decorate an apartment so it felt like a home instead of just a place to work. Tom had become Maya's accountability partner for trying new things. He encouraged her to take a pottery class at the community center, something Maya never would have considered before. Tom understood what it felt like to rebuild your identity, and he helped Maya see that she didn't have to choose between being a researcher and being a person. She could be both. Rita had shown Maya what it looked like to ask for help when you needed it. When Maya was struggling with anxiety about presenting her new research at a conference, Rita reminded her that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was the foundation of strength. Rita had taught Maya that accepting support from others wasn't a sign of failure, but a sign of wisdom.
Yes.
Maya's research had taken on new depth and meaning. She was still studying human connection, but now she understood it from the inside. Her papers were being quoted more than ever before, not just because they were scientifically sound, but because they contained the kind of insight that only comes from lived experience. Maya had recently started co-leading a support group with David, something that would have been impossible during her observer days. She found that her research background, combined with her personal journey, made her uniquely qualified to help others who were struggling with isolation and connection. The university had offered Maya a promotion that would require her to focus more on administrative work and less on research and community involvement. 6 months ago, Maya would have accepted immediately. The prestige and salary increase would have been irresistible. But now, Maya turned down the offer. She had learned that success meant more than professional achievements. Success meant having people in your life who cared about you as a person, not just for what you could accomplish. Maya's daily routine had completely changed. Instead of waking up to research papers, she often woke up to text messages from friends checking in on her. Instead of eating lunch alone while reading academic journals, she regularly met with Rita for coffee or had lunch with colleagues who had become actual friends. Instead of spending every evening analyzing other people's relationships, Maya was now building her own. The most beautiful change was that Maya had learned to be present in her own life. She no longer felt like she was watching life happen to other people while she remained safely on the sidelines. She was an active participant in her own story, someone who both gave and received love, support, and friendship. Maya often thought about the video footage that had changed everything, the image of herself always on the outside, always observing, never participating. Now, if someone were to film her daily life, they would see something completely different. They would see someone who had learned that the most important research she could ever do was the research of living fully as a human being, connected to other human beings. Maya had discovered that all her years of studying human connection had been preparation for this moment, the moment when she finally had the courage to stop studying life and start living it.